You clicked this video because you are exhausted, tired of explaining basic logic to people who refuse to listen, tired of winning arguments but losing your peace of mind. Carl Jung warned that this kind of stupidity is not just annoying, it is dangerous. And he discovered something that will change how you handle it forever. Here is what most people do not understand. Jung did not define stupidity as low intelligence. He defined it as unconsciousness, a psychological state where someone is possessed by a complex or caught in what he called the mob mind. They are not thinking. They are being thought through. And when you try to use logic against this state, you are fighting a ghost. You are about to learn why every attempt to reason with unconscious people has backfired, why you feel drained after these conversations, and most importantly, Jung's counterintuitive strategy that preserves your sanity while everyone else is losing theirs. But first, let me tell you about the trap you keep falling into. Jung spent decades studying what he called unconscious possession. He documented patients who seemed intelligent in every way except one. They could not think clearly about certain topics: marriage, politics, money, religion. The moment these subjects came up, it was like watching a different person take over. Consider a case profile that illustrates this pattern perfectly. A composite example based on patterns Jung observed repeatedly shows a university professor who could lecture brilliantly on philosophy. This man could analyze Kant and Hegel with precision. His students called him a genius. But when the topic turned to his marriage, he became a different person. His wife had cheated on him years ago, and every conversation, no matter how it started, would circle back to this betrayal. Jung realized the professor was not stupid. He was unconscious. A complex had taken control of his psyche. This complex acted like an autonomous personality. It had its own logic, its own emotions, its own agenda. And when someone is possessed by a complex, logic cannot reach them. Think about the last time you tried to explain something obvious to someone. You laid out facts. You used clear examples. You stayed calm and rational. And they looked at you like you were speaking a foreign language. That was not because they were dumb. It was because a complex was filtering everything you said through its own distorted lens. Jung wrote that when a complex is activated, the ego becomes powerless. The person stops being an individual. They become a mouthpiece for collective unconscious patterns. They repeat the same arguments their parents made. They echo beliefs from their social group. They are not present. They are possessed. This is why intelligent people keep failing when they deal with unconsciousness. They think they are talking to a person. They are actually talking to a complex. And complexes do not care about your facts. But here is where it gets worse. Jung discovered that when you argue with unconsciousness, something terrible happens to you. He called it psychological contagion. You cannot stay at your level of consciousness when engaging with someone at a lower level. You have to drop down to meet them. And when you drop down, you become infected. Have you ever noticed this? You start a conversation calm and rational. The other person says something absurd. You correct them politely. They double down. You explain again, more firmly this time. They twist your words. You feel frustration rising. You speak louder. Your heart rate increases. Your thoughts get scattered. By the end of the conversation, you are angry, irrational, and reactive, exactly like the person you were trying to reason with. Congratulations, you just got infected. Jung wrote about this phenomenon extensively. He said that unconscious content is contagious. When you try to fight it directly, you absorb it. You become the thing you are fighting against. The rational person becomes irrational. The calm person becomes angry. The clear thinker becomes confused. We see this dynamic clearly in the story of a psychologist who specialized in treating narcissistic personality disorder. A narrative illustration based on patterns, Jung documented shows how someone could help their clients beautifully. This professional had years of training. She understood the mechanics of narcissism better than almost anyone. But when her own mother called, she turned into a screaming child within minutes. The professional mask would fall away completely. This is the trap. Intelligent people believe their intelligence protects them. It does not. In fact, it makes them more vulnerable, because they think they can win the argument. They think one more explanation will break through. They think logic is enough. Jung observed patient after patient fall into this pattern. They would come to him exhausted, confused, doubting their own sanity. Why? Because they kept trying to use their conscious mind to fix someone else's unconscious problem. It is like trying to perform surgery with a hammer. The more intelligent you are, the more dangerous this trap becomes, because intelligence gives you confidence. It makes you believe you can solve any problem with enough reasoning. But unconscious complexes do not respond to reason. They respond to energy. But Jung also noticed something else, something that made him reconsider everything. The intelligent people who kept getting into these battles had a shadow problem of their own. Jung called it the arrogance of intellect. They were so identified with being the smart one that they needed other people to be the stupid one. Their ego depended on this dynamic. Think about it. Why do you keep trying to fix people who do not want to be fixed? Why do you keep explaining things to people who are not asking for explanations? Why do you feel personally offended when someone believes something irrational? Jung would say you are projecting your own shadow. The parts of yourself that you judge as stupid, irrational, or unconscious. Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The alchemist's path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook, in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. When you see these qualities in others, your shadow gets activated, and then you have to fight it. Not in them, in yourself. Let us look at a narrative illustration that makes this crystal clear. Consider a case profile of a mathematician who complained endlessly about his colleague's illogical thinking. The colleague made decisions based on gut feelings instead of data. This drove the mathematician absolutely crazy. He spent hours trying to show his colleague why this was wrong. He created spreadsheets, presentations, logical arguments. He lost sleep over it. He ranted to his wife about it every single night. He made it his personal mission to convert this colleague to rationality. His obsession with this person consumed him. Jung's approach in similar cases was always to ask one simple question. When was the last time you trusted your own intuition? In this composite example, the mathematician went completely silent. He could not remember. He realized that every decision he made went through multiple layers of analysis. He had spreadsheets for absolutely everything. Buying a car, choosing a restaurant, even picking out clothes. He had systematically cut himself off from his own intuitive function. He had murdered that part of himself, and now he was attacking it wherever he saw it in others. The colleague was just a mirror. This is the secret that intelligent people do not want to hear. You are not trying to help the other person. You are trying to destroy the parts of yourself that you cannot accept. Every time you call someone else stupid, you are really saying, I refuse to acknowledge that I have my own irrational beliefs. I refuse to see my own unconscious patterns. I refuse to admit that I am sometimes possessed by complexes too. Jung wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, but only if we are brave enough to look inward instead of staying focused outward. Only if we have the courage to ask what this says about me instead of what this says about them. In that composite example, the mathematician eventually realized something profound that changed his entire life. His colleague was not the problem. His need to be absolutely right was the problem. Once he saw this clearly, once he integrated this shadow aspect, the colleague's behavior stopped bothering him entirely. Not because the colleague changed his ways. The colleague kept making intuitive decisions, But the mathematician was no longer triggered. He had done the inner work. So what is the solution? How did Jung recommend intelligent people deal with unconsciousness without getting infected or losing themselves in the process? Jung studied this question for his entire career. He worked with patients from every walk of life, academics who could not talk to their families, business leaders who melted down in board meetings, therapists who got triggered by their own clients. All of them had the same problem. They tried to use consciousness to fight unconsciousness directly. Jung realized the solution was not more logic. It was not better arguments. It was not finding the perfect words that would finally make the unconscious person see reason. The solution was withdrawal, but not the kind of withdrawal you think. Jung was not talking about running away or giving up. He was talking about withdrawing your projections, withdrawing your need to fix the other person, withdrawing your identification with being right. Here is how it works. When someone says something unconscious, your first instinct is to correct them. Jung would tell you to pause. Ask yourself, why does this bother me so much? What part of me is being triggered right now? What am I projecting onto this person? This simple pause changes everything. Because when you stop trying to change the other person, you create space to examine yourself. And that is where the real work happens. Not out there. In here. Jung called this withdrawing your projection. You stop expecting the unconscious person to become conscious. You stop waiting for them to validate your intelligence. You stop needing them to agree with you. Instead, you turn your attention to the only person you can actually change, yourself. But Jung did not stop there. He gave his patients a specific technique. He called it starving the complex. When dealing with someone who is unconscious, you become psychologically neutral, not cold, not distant, just neutral, completely and utterly neutral. You do not feed the complex. Complexes need energy to survive. They are like parasites that feed on attention, emotion, and reaction. When you argue, you are giving them exactly what they want. When you get frustrated, you are feeding them. When you try harder to explain, you are feeding them. Jung discovered that complexes are like fires. They need fuel. Your engagement is the fuel. When you stop engaging emotionally, the fire starts to die down. This does not mean you become robotic. It means you stop giving your energy to a battle you cannot win. Instead, you observe. You watch the complex operate. You notice its patterns. You see how it defends itself, how it attacks, how it distorts reality. And you do this without judgment, just curiosity. Consider a case profile that illustrates this perfectly. A composite example based on patterns Jung documented shows a woman whose father would start ranting about politics at every family gathering. She used to fight back with facts and logic. It never worked. He just got angrier. So did she. These battles would rage for hours. After learning Jung's approach, she tried a different strategy. She just listened. She did not argue. She did not agree. She just observed. She watched the complex operate without feeding it any energy. Her father's rants got progressively shorter. He seemed genuinely confused by her lack of resistance. Within a few weeks, he stopped ranting around her completely. The complex had lost its power. She discovered that the less she engaged, the more peace she experienced. Jung said that consciousness is the greatest weapon against the unconscious, but not consciousness directed at the other person. Consciousness directed at yourself. When you can witness your own reactions without being controlled by them, you have achieved something rare. This is what intelligent people do not understand. The goal is not to wake up the unconscious person. The goal is to stay awake yourself. The goal is to maintain your own psychological integrity while everyone around you is losing theirs. But there is one more layer. And this is where Jung's method gets truly powerful. Jung taught his patients to use encounters with unconscious people as mirrors. Every time someone triggers you with their stupidity, their irrationality, their refusal to see reason. Jung would say, that person is showing you something about yourself. Not because you are stupid, but because you have your own unconscious areas, your own complexes, your own blind spots. The person who enrages you is simply activating parts of your psyche that you have not integrated yet. Jung called this shadow work. When someone irritates you, that irritation is data. It tells you where your shadow is hiding. Maybe you judge others for being emotional because you suppress your own emotions. Maybe you criticize others for being illogical because you fear your own irrationality. Consider a case profile that demonstrates this principle. A narrative illustration based on patterns Jung observed shows a therapist who complained that her clients were too resistant to change. They would not do the homework. They would not follow through. This therapist was brilliant. She had all the right techniques, but her clients were not improving. Jung's approach in similar cases would be to ask the therapist to examine their own resistance to change. At first, she was offended. She was the one trying to help people change. But Jung would push deeper. And eventually, she realized something shocking. She had been stuck in the same job for 10 years, even though she was miserable. She had been in the same toxic relationship for 8 years. She talked constantly about making changes, but she never did. Her clients were mirrors showing her what she could not see in herself. This is the deepest level of Jung's strategy. You stop fighting stupidity out there and start integrating your own shadow in here. You stop trying to make unconscious people conscious and start making your own unconscious conscious. You stop projecting your intellectual arrogance onto others and start acknowledging the parts of yourself that you have been violently denying for years. When you do this, something magical happens, something that seems almost supernatural. The unconscious people stop bothering you, not because they changed. They are exactly the same. Because you changed. You no longer need them to be different. You no longer need to prove you are smarter. You no longer need to win the argument. You no longer need them to validate your intelligence. You have found validation from within. Times 6. You have achieved what Jung called psychological sovereignty. You are no longer controlled by other people's unconsciousness. You are no longer infected by their complexes. You are no longer dragged into battles that drain your energy and destroy your peace. You have become free, truly free. This is the ultimate intelligence, not the ability to out-argue someone, not the ability to prove you are right, not having the biggest vocabulary or the most degrees, but the ability to maintain your consciousness in the presence of unconsciousness, the ability to stay whole when everyone around you is fragmented, the ability to remain at peace when everyone else is at war with themselves and each other. This is real power. This is real strength. Jung studied patients who achieved this state. They were remarkable, truly remarkable. They could sit in a room full of unconscious people and remain completely unaffected. Not because they were cold or detached, not because they did not care, but because they had done the inner work. They had integrated their shadow. They had withdrawn their projections. They had stopped feeding other people's complexes. They had become masters of their own psyche. These people had a quality that Jung called presence, real presence. They did not need to say much. They did not need to argue. They did not need to prove anything. Their consciousness spoke for itself. It radiated from them like light from a candle in a dark room, and unconscious people could feel it. Some were attracted to it like moths to a flame. Some were repelled by it like vampires from sunlight, but no one could ignore it. No one could remain neutral in the face of real consciousness. This is what happens when you stop trying to fix stupid people and start fixing yourself. You become a walking example of what consciousness looks like. You become a lighthouse in the darkness. Not by preaching, not by teaching, not by explaining, not by arguing, but simply by being, simply by existing in your truth. Jung warned that this path is not easy. It is actually one of the hardest things you will ever do. It requires brutal honesty with yourself. Honesty that most people cannot handle. It requires admitting that you are not as conscious as you think you are. It requires looking directly at the parts of yourself that you have spent your whole life carefully avoiding. It requires humility, real humility, not false modesty, but genuine acknowledgement of your own unconscious areas, your own shadow, your own capacity for the very things you judge in others. Most intelligent people are not willing to do this work. They would rather stay stuck in the same exhausting pattern, fighting the same pointless battles, getting triggered by the same unconscious people, feeling intellectually superior while secretly feeling emotionally exhausted, living in a prison of their own making. But the ones who do this work, they discover something profound, something that changes everything. Intelligence is not about how much you know. It is not about how many books you have read. It is not about how well you can argue or debate. It is not about being right. True intelligence is emotional regulation, self-awareness, the ability to witness your own mind without being controlled by it, the ability to see your own patterns without being possessed by them. Jung spent his entire life studying consciousness, decades of work. He worked with thousands of patients from every background imaginable. He analyzed dreams, myths, and symbols from every culture on Earth. He went deeper into the human psyche than anyone before or since, and his conclusion was always the same. Always. The unconscious is not the enemy. The unconscious is just the unconscious. Your reaction to the unconscious is the enemy. Your need to fight it. Your need to fix it. Your need to destroy it in others. When you fight unconsciousness, you become unconscious. When you judge it harshly, you strengthen it. When you try to destroy it in others, you feed it in yourself. But when you withdraw your projection, maintain your neutrality, and use every encounter as a mirror for your own shadow work, you transform it. You transform yourself. You become free. You break the chains. This is Jung's strategy. This is how intelligent people deal with stupidity without losing themselves in the process. They stop trying to change the world and start changing themselves. They stop fighting other people's darkness and start illuminating their own. Remember where we started. You clicked this video because you are tired, exhausted, tired of dealing with unconscious people, tired of losing your peace, tired of winning arguments, but feeling like you lost something more important, your sanity, your energy, your joy. Jung would tell you that you have been fighting the wrong battle this entire time. You have been fighting someone else's battle instead of your own. The battle is not out there with them. The battle is in here with you. Your desperate need to be right, your compulsive need to fix others, your incessant need to prove your intelligence, your deep fear of your own unconsciousness, your terror of your own shadow, your refusal to look at the parts of yourself that you have been running from your entire life. When you win this inner battle, the outer battle disappears completely. It simply ceases to exist. Unconscious people stop draining you. They stop triggering you. They stop having any power over your peace. Not because they changed. They are exactly the same. Because you did. You changed. You transformed. You evolved. This is the intelligence that Jung was pointing to. Not intellectual superiority. Not academic achievement. Not the ability to win debates. But psychological maturity. Real maturity. The ability to remain conscious when everyone around you is unconscious. The ability to stay centered when everyone else is spinning out of control. The ability to maintain your humanity when everyone else is losing theirs. The ability to stay sane in an insane world. If you are ready to stop fighting and start understanding, subscribe to this channel. If you recognize yourself in Jung's description of the intelligent person trapped in an unconscious battle, leave a comment below. Share your experience. Tell your story. You are not alone in this struggle. Thousands of people are fighting this same battle right now. Jung left us with one final insight, one final gift. He said the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who your parents wanted you to be, not who society expects you to be, but who you truly are. But you cannot become who you truly are while fighting other people's battles. You cannot integrate your shadow while projecting it onto others. You cannot achieve consciousness while staying obsessively focused on everyone else's unconsciousness. The work is here, right here. The battle is here. The transformation is here. Stop looking out there for stupid people to fix. Stop searching for unconscious people to correct. Start looking in here for unconscious parts to integrate. That is how intelligent people deal with stupidity. They realize it was never about stupidity at all. It was always about consciousness. And consciousness begins and ends with you. Only you. It always has. It always will. Thanks for watching. See you in the alchemist's path, perception training for empaths. You'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get the Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.